Welcome to the Frontline Club. Thanks for braving the cold. This evening we're going to discuss Sudan, and the reason we've picked this date in particular is that Sudan now faces a very important 18 months, probably the most important 18 months in its recent history. Two events in particular stand out. One is the first national elections since 1986, which are due to happen on April the 10th this year. Originally, they were conceived to be national elections at all levels throughout the country. We're going to discuss here whether any of that will actually happen. Another event is next year is a referendum on southern independence, i.e. whether South Sudan, a vast territory in its own right, will finally break away from Sudan and become a country in its own right. And both of these were envisaged in the CPA, Comprehensive Peace Agreement, which was a great agreement signed between the various parts of Sudan, particularly between the government in the north and the government in the south, on January the 9th, 2005. And the reason you may have seen a lot about Sudan and the future of Sudan in the newspapers recently is partly because it's been the 5th anniversary of that agreement. But we also need to consider these events against a fairly gloomy backdrop. If you follow Sudan, you'll have seen a lot of institutes, think tanks, governments issuing fairly gloomy predictions about the future, and particularly about the state of South Sudan and the relationship between the north and the south. Various people, you get quite a lot of apocalyptic versions now of the two sides going back to war, of increasing conflict. And a lot of people point to the increasing divisions in the south and fighting within South Sudan. And that's to say nothing of Darfur, of course, where there's still no peace agreement 6 years on from when that conflict broke out into civil war in April 2003. There's still no peace agreement. The rebels remain divided there, and we'll also be discussing how Darfur fits into these other events mainly happening in South Sudan. So to discuss these, we have a very good panel, mostly from Sudan itself. Daniel Deng, who's the Episcopalian Bishop of Sudan. Osman Humeida, who's a human rights activist from Khartoum. He's now director of the Africa Center for Justice and Peace Studies, based in Kampala, Uganda. On my right, Sarah Pantuliano from the Overseas Development Institute. She's one of the world's leading experts on Sudan and has done an awful lot of research amongst particularly the Arab tribes in South Sudan and the central areas in Sudan, and has written extensively on the subject. And last we have Paul Akara. He is a new breed completely. He is the deputy envoy for the government of Southern Sudan in London. And I say a new breed because this is a new event for the government of South Sudan, setting up embassies abroad, and he will be representing the views of the government of South Sudan here tonight. So the format is I'm going to invite each one of them to have 5 to 7 minutes, but no more than 7 minutes. And I've asked them each to begin by offering their predictions and analysis of the three main events I've just mentioned: the elections in April, the referendum in 2011, and the general future of the CPA and relations between the North and the South. And then we'll open it to the floor and hopefully have a good discussion involving everybody. And we hope to release you by 8:30. So without any more ado, we'll start with Daniel Deng. Daniel.
Well, thank you very much. I'm the Episcopal Church of the Sudan. I'm the Archbishop for the whole country. I think the Comprehensive Peace Agreement is the key. It's the key for the peace in the Sudan. When it was signed, it was signed that because the Sudan was at war, for the reasons of marginalization of all the regions in the country, marginalization in the western and in southern Sudan and Blue Nile and in Nova Mountain. And then the agreement came to heal that, and there are certain process which has been put into the agreement, such as elections coming in April this year. Secondly, to pass the laws for the consultation, popular consultation in the Nova Mountain and in Blue Nile, and then referendum laws in Abyei, and then the referendum laws for the Southern Sudan. This is the process for to complete the comprehensive agreement, whereby at the end it will come to when the Southern Sudanese are going to be asked whether they will be within the United Sudan or they will opt it for the separation of their own state. That agreement at the moment, the prediction you may put is that if it is not properly implemented, then it will cause fear, because everybody in the Sudan is only gearing to that peace agreement. That is the only chance for the whole of Sudan to say a word, because we have been together for 50 years, and people of the 54 years, but people of Southern Sudan have never been asked what is their opinion about the ruling in the country. So this is a chance for the people of Sudan really to be asked, and that. Fears people may be thinking is that I don't predict that there will be a problem, but the problem will come if this comprehensive agreement is not implemented by word and spirit. That's where there is the fear.
Thank you, Daniel. Osman.
Okay, thanks, Richard, but I'm not sure whether your 7 minutes will be enough to
it has to
all
be.
these issues and big issues now in 2010 and 11, actually 2 years. And I'm a bit jet lagged as well. I just arrived very late last night from New York, and I'm not very good when I'm a bit jet lagged and doesn't have enough sleep. Anyway, I will start with the election and the CPA. And I think the big question is what so far had been implemented of the CPA during the course of the last 5 years, looking at the different aspects and component of the agreement, which is the power sharing, the wealth sharing, security arrangement, and others. I would say the only is the security arrangement, and the security arrangement only in terms that there is no fighting between the SPLM and the Khartoum government forces. But looking at the other aspect of the security, and I think all of you, as you have read, the insecurity both in the north and the south in terms of the number of being killed. And actually the people being killed in southern Sudan during the last 12 months are 2,500 people more than those who killed in Darfur. And 350,000 people have been displaced so far. I would say there is a lot to talk about when you come to the implementation of the CPA, but critical to that is when you talk about the wealth sharing, they complain about the oil revenue, not just by the SPLM, but also by independent other organizations, and you have read the report had been recently been out. And you go to the list and you find, and we come to the critical part of it, which is the law reform, including the laws that would affect not just the way the two parties are operating, but also the coming election. When I come to the election, I think there is 3 main points to consider. The first one is the census, which is being contested by the SPLM and other forces in Sudan. And yes, there is one interesting thing that is to talk about the census. That is the last census in 2000 and in 1983. The people the population in the south of Darfur, where there is a concentration of nomad tribes, which is particularly would be supporting the National Congress Party. The population in this region between the census of 83 and 89 have decreased by 15%. In the last census, they increased by 300% in the course of the last 15, and this is a big question. And this comparison, I think that I can refer everyone to an article written by Rebecca Hamilton from the Open Society Institute about this. Why the population had been doubled or tripled or 10 times according to the last election, where the National Congress Party might have, or they have a presumption of they have a power or broader basis or support. And while they decrease in other areas, which is possibly the SPLM or other political forces might have supporters. The second issue is the registration, which is we know had been contested by all the political parties in the north and in the south. That is being rigged. And I received a report. My organization will publish a report next week documenting all these irregularities, which is 3 kinds of irregularities being so far documented. 1 by the National Congress Party, 2 by the Commission, the National Commission for Election, 3 by the National Security Forces, and there is another report of irregularities regarding the South, which is I received a report from Nafi Ali Nafi complaining that there is irregularity committed by the SPLM in terms of human rights violation. The other violation are violation of human rights, which is mainly committed by the security forces. I will give very few examples because I have only 7 minutes. And the National Congress Party tended to collect the voter IDs from the voters after the registration. In some areas, it was done systematically using the state apparatus or the state institution. In South Darfur Hospital in Niala, the director of the hospital or the manager of the hospital sent an internal circular requesting every employee to hand over his voting ID to someone he appointed within the hospital. And he ties that, he links that, and he conditioned that if you didn't do that, you're not going to get your salary by the end of the month. This happened also in Brigade 74 in a rank area, where the commander, he ordered all the soldiers and everyone under him to submit his voting ID to a specific person he appointed as the person will be responsible of receiving this voting ID. It is a practice, not just, this is a 2 highlight incident where obviously the institution had been involved in these irregularities, but there is others where the Popular Committee or the National Congress members, they collected the voter IDs from the people. They might claim the people voluntarily have giving or surrendering their IDs because they want to keep them safe or not to be lost. But this is apparently the 2 obvious violation. The state institution had been used so far. The political party, as I said, I was just reading today that the Cuba Forces Alliances, which is mainly the opposition party, are calling for redoing the registration process in the whole of the country. Otherwise, they consider that the election will be far from being fair and free. The other issue of regarding the election, which is the general atmosphere, which is the freedom of expression and freedom of association. I just made a statement last week. I was in New York when the demonstration to the Sudanese parliament calling for the law reform had been violently disturbed and crushed by the security forces and the army and the National Congress. I said, if they are not allowing a peaceful demonstration to shout outside the parliament, would the NCP ever be able to give the parliament itself? I think the answer is very obvious. They're not ready to listen even to a peaceful demonstration. And there is a number of people or monitors had been arrested during the process of the registration in different parts of the country, from the north to the south, and in Western Sudan, including some of the members of the NCP party being arrested in the south by the SPLM government. And I will come to the other issue, which is the referendum. I will skip the election, which I might have 2 minutes. The referendum, I think there is a key issue regarding the situation in the South, whether the South will remain part of a united Sudan or have the other choice to break away and have an independent country. And these issues should be looked at seriously. The first issue is the increasing violence, tribal violence in the South of Sudan. And as I said earlier, 250,000 people have been killed during the course of this violence. However, there
2,500.
2,500. However, The SPLM keep allegedly that is the NCP have a hand on inflaming or inciting this violence. But regardless, this is a fact or no. The reality is the violence is there. In some areas it exists with or without the existence of any element of the PNC. The other issue that is the LRA is actively branding across the whole region of the southern Sudan. And I think there is two issues there. The issue of the poverty, the lack of development and lack of good governance and lack of enforcing the peace. The issue of poverty, and I think this is not just the responsibility of the government of Southern Sudan. I think the international community have stopped short of their obligation of the responsibility to protect. The responsibility to protect is not ending with the ending of the war between the North and the South. There is many elements to that. That is, disarmament is an issue. Development is a crucial issue. Without real and genuine and sincere development, genuine development to the South, violence will never stop. What common between the Southerners should be the market and should be development, not their tribe, not their livestock, not other things. I think the international community pledged specific money to the South in the Oslo meeting. None of that had been materialized, and the people of Southern Sudan has been punished twice. For 20 years they had been under war, and because of the war of Darfur yet again, on the sanction, the people of Southern Sudan, they got nothing out of the international organization, community commitment to contribute to the issue of the development, which is key if we want to save the peace, not just between the North and South, peace inside the South, in the South itself. And I think this issue should not be undermined. I'm appreciating the charitable activities that is the NGOs are doing in the South. They're doing a great job. Without that, there will be a catastrophic and humanitarian crisis in the South, but that will never make development. The infrastructure is basic. People in the South, sometimes in some areas, they have to walk for days to get a piece of bread or anything that is to be bought. In some areas, someone told me there is nothing. There is no machine belong to the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. That is the responsibility of the international community. They have to realize that, and they have to realize that the protection issue is there. And some people might call that is the unionist mandate should be changed, or within the current mandate that is should be reinforced. The peacekeeping forces that exist in Southern Sudan. Referendum might have the different option. I would see that Southern Sudan might become an independent country, but without solving this, addressing this issue of insecurity, poverty, development, we're going to get nowhere. The last issue for the government of Southern Sudan to consider, which is the situation in Darfur. Without getting peace in Darfur, there would no peace in Southern Sudan. And for simple reasons, they know there is no peace in North Uganda. They know what the LRA are doing now in Southern Sudan. And this would simply be the same case of Darfur to Southern Sudan. Not is going to be a problem for the North, but it will be for the whole region. And thanks.
Thank you very much. Sarah.
Let me start with the reflections of where the CPA is going. And I think to discuss that, I think we need to remind ourselves of the fact that it is true, I agree with Osman, there have been a lot of shortcomings and challenges in the implementation of the CPA, some more serious than others. But I think we need to remind ourselves of the fact that the CPA was an agreement of bewildering complexity, that it would have challenged very seasoned governments in the north to implement. If you look at the provisions of the agreement, the mechanisms for implementation, all the committees that were created as a result of the agreement, in 6 years it was impossible always to translate such an agreement into reality in such a short space of time, particularly between two parties that fundamentally did not trust each other and had come to an agreement where there was no real shared vision or not genuine shared vision. And of course, in the process, lost a key actor that shared some of the vision, the late Dr. Garang, and was then faced with fresh new problems about how to renew a partnership when such a fundamental element came to be missing. Now, having said this as a background, where is the agreement going now? I mean, it's true there are two critical landmarks ahead of us that can take the country back to a situation of open conflict, which of course none of us would like to see. But I think it's also incumbent upon us to provide a different narrative around Sudan and start thinking about the next steps in the implementation of the CPA as fundamental steps, but not the end of the road. The referendum next year is not the end of the CPA. It's yet another landmark in the implementation of the agreement. But there is life after the referendum. We just need to think how we construct and support the Sudanese in constructing the post-referendum phase. Now, obviously, all of this is happening in a context where there is very high level of tension on the ground in different parts of the country. I think this is the most important element to watch. I don't think the parties have a deliberate intention or even the interest, frankly, to resume fighting, to go back to war. But people on the ground are fighting for a number of reasons, which actually also have to do with how we, as international community, have or have not supported the implementation of the CPA. The communities, the returnees, have gone back to areas or are in areas where, particularly in southern Sudan, in the 3 areas, there is less support, ironically, than there was during the OLS. We have experimented with a number of funding instruments in Sudan and ideas about donor alignment and donor support to state building. What that has meant, in practical terms, has been less delivery of services of the type that the NGOs were delivering during OLS. And it was obviously the right thing to try and support.
You could just explain what OLS is.
The Operation Lifeline Sudan, which was the mechanism used during the conflict to provide assistance to southern Sudan. Now, supporting the capacity of GUSS was obviously the right thing to do, but it was not an either-or, and the two things should have happened together, because de facto what's happened on the ground has been, for the real people there to see the clinic run by NGO X go, the school run by NGO Z go, and have no support, because in the meantime, GUSS is still building their capacity to deliver the public good to their people. And so, of course, while there was some enthusiasm in the first few years of, after the agreement for a new phase that peace provided in southern Sudan, enthusiasm has been wearing off. After 3 years, you kind of start thinking, what's in there for my family? What's in there for me? Actually, in the end, maybe I was better off during the war, where I had more assistance and more support. And that's what, is actually in the minds of many people have gone back. Fighting for resources, because that's pretty much at the heart of what's happening in the south. Now, these are key issues as we move towards the elections. The preparation for the elections have not been ideal, to use a euphemism. We are late. Technically, there's been support that should have materialized a long time ago. We're still wondering what the constituencies are going to look like. Civic education has been to be non-existent, let's say that. The complexity of the ballot papers we're going to put in front of people. In Khartoum, they did a test a few months ago with graduates at the University of Khartoum who were given the ballot papers and to try and exercise their right to vote. It took an average of 22 minutes for a graduate at the University of Khartoum to fill the ballot papers. Now just imagine this, in the middle of nowhere, I don't know, in Akobo or in Awil, any of the remote areas of southern Sudan, where people have never had the right to vote before, have never done this before. Don't really
90% female illiteracy.
Yes, yes. I mean, just imagine that. So we can hardly expect a transformative outcome from these elections, but the elections cannot really be postponed or avoided. They are an important milestone in the minds of people. For the more educated, they need to happen. But of course, there'll be dissatisfaction afterwards. People are likely to have results that will not agree with. And so what we need to prepare for, the parties, as well as the international community through UMMIS and the other donors, is how to mitigate what is inevitable to happen after the elections, the post-electoral violence that we are bound to see in some areas, particularly where elections will be contested on an ethnic card, which will inevitably exacerbate tension further. These plans are not in place now, and it's obviously very urgent to start thinking of how we can mitigate this tension. And then there is the referendum. And again, the referendum, as I was saying earlier, can be seen as the end of the road. It's the beginning of a fundamental new road. There is an increasing acceptance that the Southerners will choose to secede. I think 2 days ago, for the first time, I've heard a senior member of the NCP, such as Ambassador Dirdiri, say that secession is inevitable and we need to start planning at how we manage the post-referendum phase. I mean, that's an important step for the NCP to say that publicly so strongly. But then from secession to independence, I mean, secession doesn't immediately translate in an independent Southern Sudan. There is a lot of work to be done to create the independent Southern Sudan that will come after the vote in the referendum. And there will be many more challenges. And a post-referendum phase that needs to be structured to try and make sure that these two new realities live with each other, not least because of the two areas in between. BA has got a bit of a special status, but Southern Kordofan and Blue Nile will still be there to provide a critical element of tension, of course, Upper Nile and in Bahr el Ghazal on the other side. And all of this is happening in the context of an absence of the diplomatic strength that we have had supporting the agreement, the parties getting to the agreement. We didn't necessarily have a shared vision, but we had a shared commitment and a lot of shared commitment to find a solution that was as acceptable to IGAD and the IGAD partners that were supporting the process towards the agreement. That same high-level engagement is not there now. And that's something else that is urgent to reconstitute, that high-level, robust support to the parties as they move towards these critical landmarks needs to be there. There'll be enormous challenges, not least, the status of the Southerners in the north if the South votes for secession. There's a lot of discussion about what is going to happen to them. Of course, the sharing of the resources. I mean, for Southern Sudan to be able to use the oil, we still need the pipeline that is going up north. They will need the best possible mediation from the region and other international partners to support them finding a constructive way forward.
Sarah, thank you very much. Paul.
Thank you, Richard.
End this bit.
Yes. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. And let me also take this opportunity to thank the members of the panel. I think there are areas that I'm going to try to contribute. One is the election, referendum, and probably the future of the CPA, as you rightly said. Now, election, yes, there's a lot of preparation going on about the election in Sudan. But of course, election of Sudan also is faced with a lot of challenging, one of which is, let me just point out one of the things which is very challenging as far as the election is concerned. The security law in Sudan has not yet been repealed. In other words, if you are a Sudanese today and you are in Khartoum or in any part of northern Sudan, you cannot express your political view freely because you might end up actually finding yourself in jail. And these are the practical reality that we face in Sudan. These laws, of course, are incompatible with the CPA. The CPA is very clear. When the CPA was signed, some of the things were supposed to be, some of the laws were supposed to be repealed, one of which is the security law in Sudan. But unfortunately, it has not been repealed, and it has not yet been resolved. And the parliament has gone in a recess, and you don't know whether the parliament will come back and discuss these laws. These laws, of course, was passed recently by the members of the National Congress and the parliament. And unfortunately, the CPA is also very clear that for the law to, for any bill to become a law in Sudan, it has to be ratified by 75% of the members of the parliament. In other words, it is not only the CPA, it is not only the NCP, which is about 52% of the members of the parliament. They need also the SPLM to be on board in order for that particular bill to be ratified or to be enacted into law. That did not happen, and as a result, the CPA was violated, basically, and the law was passed in the parliament. That was one of the things which a lot of people felt that it was very unfortunate. But it's still, of course, we are still waiting whether, of course, the system that we have in Sudan is that if the bill is being passed in the parliament, it has to be signed by the presidency for it to become a law. Now, we are still waiting whether the presidency will sign that for it to become a law. So in terms of, the election, the practicality, the fairness, and, the freedom and so on, is still very much question mark onto it. So that's the situation that we face with the election. But people are very much going on and organizing themselves, preparing themselves that if the election is going to take place in April as it has been scheduled, then of course, parties who have registered will of course participate in that election. But the question of course is that, is it going to be free and fair? Which is actually the benchmark of the CPA. And that is what the international community is waiting to see, that, that in order to give any government which is coming after April in Sudan, to give it a credibility, to make it credible, the election has to be free and fair. Okay, and these are some of the things that the international community is very much waiting for it, and all of us as Sudanese also is waiting for it. The other thing in the election, which is a very challenging thing, is, as Sarah said early on, or alluded to, is the voting system. The voting system in Sudan is one of the most complicated voting system in the world, if I may say so. I don't know where in any part of the world whereby there is a similar voting system as it is in the South, as it is in the Sudan. If you go to the Southern Sudan, one particular person will be voting about 12 different ballots. I don't know, how easy that would be. Now, if you take into consideration also that the kind of society or the kind of the community that we have, which are still very much, illiterate and so on, how are you going really to make sure that, they are going to cast the right vote and they are going to tick the right boxes? These are some of the things that which the election will be faced with. And of course, the other issue is the resources. There is no adequate resources, which in order to make sure also that voting education, and I think there are already some, some views which is already in here, one of which is the views which is, some people are saying that, why not to have, for instance, a radio mobile in order to help the people that, will be voting, to educate them as a part of the, educating people during or before the election. These are some of the things that will require an enormous amount of resources. But of course, that is where the international community will have to step in to help Sudan. These are some of the challenges that we are faced with, you see. Now, referendum. Let me just come to the incidences which is happening in the Southern Sudan, which has been said by Osman. Yes, there are incidences in the Southern Sudan whereby different ethnic groups or different communities actually fight among themselves. But this fighting is basically being exacerbated by the fact that, Sudan has been at war. If my arithmetic is correct, is something in the region of 38 years of Sudan independent. We have been at war. We spent 38 years at war with each other, and that is the reality. And as a result, there is grievances which has been accumulated for a very long time. These grievances has not yet been settled. And during the negotiation, I think the SPLM came out clearly to say that we need to adopt the South Africa model to reconcile the different communities. But unfortunately, the National Congress rejected it. And as a result, this problem has not yet been resolved. So what is happening in the Southern Sudan are so many factors, one of which is that you've got ex-combatant who basically fought during the war, and therefore they've been laid out. They are not in the regular army. Others are, the majority of which are those who have been recruited by the government of Sudan of the day during the 21 years of war into a militia group. Now this one, the CPA is very clear. Now when the CPA was signed, the army which is not regular army, they were then given the two choices. Is either they join the Sudan army or they join the SPLA. Now the majority of them, of course, is coming from the government. These were the government organized forces. And this one, they found themselves that they could not fit into the army. So they were left out. And as they were left out, they've not been catered for. So they found themselves that they don't have anything to do. And as you know, even in this country, in UK where we live at the moment, the young teenagers, because they don't have anything to do, they take knives, they take weapons and so on, and start killing each other. And this is the reality which is also happening in the Southern Sudan. Now, there is very little with a government which is very new government, which has got no institution being established. Okay, as you know, Southern Sudan is not about, as it has been said, reconstruction. No, it is not. It is actually construction, because there have never been infrastructures in the Southern Sudan. The government of the day, which has been ruling Sudan for so many years, never cared about Southern Sudan, even if the resources, the oil resources that now, which is basically, keeping Sudan economically, is coming from the Southern Sudan. Southern Sudanese are not being made to benefit from it. And these are realities. In the absence of the assistance coming from the international community, then you find it very difficult for the government of Southern Sudan, a young government for the Southern Sudan, to deal with these kind of issues. They are very serious challenges, but they are doing their best to make sure that this is curtailed, or this is at least curbed. And if you look into the Southern Sudan, it's not everywhere that the insecurity which has been talked in the media is all over the place. This is completely not true. There are spot places, and I can mention in which regions that these problems are happening. Okay, one is Jongole, and Jongole now is a bit, stable. The other one is in Warab State, and then the Lake State. These are the concentrated places whereby there's a lot of problems, community against community. Okay? Now, if you have got a police which is not well trained, so it's going to be a serious challenge. But the government of Southern Sudan is doing its best to make sure that at least this problem, can at least be curbed. But also there is something that Osman has actually alluded to. There is, evident also that there are even ammunitions being found in the Southern Sudan, written made in Khartoum. Who is supplying them? Some of the communities have got Sorayas, very sophisticated, mobile phone. Where do they get it from? Soraya, to buy Soraya, one Soraya, is about $2,000 US. Where do they get it from? So there is a very serious question mark. So really, insecurity, it is very unfortunate that sometimes also Northern Sudanese, there is this kind of ideas of blaming the Southern Sudanese. They are failing, they are not doing this. But the Northern Sudanese has refused completely to take responsibility of what is happening in the South. Since independence, they've been ruling Sudan. What have they done? Today we are sharing the oil revenue, which is 50. It is not actually 50. More than 50 goes to the north. What is coming to the south? Nothing. The government of the day in Khartoum has got no single project in the Southern Sudan. We live in the United Kingdom. If the UK refused today, if the EU is not having no projects in the UK, I'm sure there will be a revolt in the UK by the public to say that we're not going to contribute to EU. Because why should I be paying my taxpayer to EU and the EU has got no project in the United Kingdom? But unfortunate situation in the Southern Sudan is that we are contributing more than 50% of our oil revenue, of our taxpayer, and yet we are not getting a single return. There is no reciprocation. And these are the realities that we face in Southern Sudan. Now, I wanted to talk about, the issue of Darfur. The issue of Darfur, the government of Southern Sudan is very clear about it. Even the parliament in Juba, there's a very clear position about it, that they're calling for a resolution to the Darfur conflict. We are not the only people that border in Darfur. Darfur is also having a long border, as opposed to the south, with the north. So it is in the interest of the north, or it is in the interest of people who are sitting in the north, to make sure that the problem in Darfur also is resolved. Our commitment to Darfur problem is that because we are trying to be human and saying that what is happening in Darfur is unacceptable, because we went through the same kind of situation. We have been sympathetic to them, but it is not. It doesn't fault. It is not the responsibility of the government of Southern Sudan to resolve the problem in Darfur. Janjaweed is not being armed, or supported by the government of Southern Sudan. It is being supported by the National Congress. Therefore, the responsibility falls on the National Congress to make sure that they solve the problem of Darfur. The core CPA, as the future of the CPA. The future of the CPA, of course, will depend very much on the core, areas which has not yet been resolved. One of which is the border demarcation. It has not yet been resolved. And our opinion is that, that is one of the areas which it has to be resolved in one way or another. As you probably, many of you may remember, in July last year, the Court of Arbitration in The Hague make a ruling of the issue of Abyei, okay? And up to now, the commission which has been set to demarcate the border in Abyei, they've been all the time bogged down by the security of Sudan Army. They are not able to do their job. In other words, that is another violation. You know, so there is sequence of violation which is being done by the government sitting in Khartoum, and yet they don't want to take the responsibility, which is very unfortunate.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt. You'll have to conclude.
Yeah. So to come down to the conclusion, to conclude, you know, is that, you know, the CPA, yes, we need, you know, a good relation between the North and the South. It is very important, but it has to be an amicable kind of understanding between the North and the South. It is not one-way traffic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, thank you very much to our panelists. I'm now going to open it out to the audience, and I'll probably take sort of bunches of questions. There's a mic, I think, which is going to go around. Several things. First of all, could you state your name and your relationship to the means of production, i.e. your job or the institution that you represent? And it's one question each, and preferably a short one, because we'll have a lot to get in. So can we start? There's a gentleman here in the front.
My name is Mike Wooldridge. I'm a journalist with the BBC, a correspondent with the BBC. I wondered if I could get the panel to project forward beyond the referendum. If there were to be, if the Southerners were to vote for independence and an independent state were to be created, what would it be like? What would it actually be viable economically, given all the challenges that we've heard about? What would its relations be like, particularly with its neighbours? What would it be like politically? How pluralist would its politics be? Would the SPLM, for example, be accept being overthrown by a popular vote in the event of a further election? What would the world's newer state actually be like?
That's such an important question. I'm going to very quickly get your views on that right now, starting with you, Paul, in about 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, yes. That is very much a political, you know, as you know, I'm a civil servant, but just I will attempt to answer that question. You know, yes, the Southern Sudan will be a viable state. It will be a viable state economically, simply because we are sustaining the North as we speak. Because the oil revenue, I think it has been said that probably 90 or 85% of the oil is coming from the South. On that basis, then we will be able to be viable. The other thing also is that agricultural-wise, Southern Sudan is also seen to be very much, will be competing with other, other countries in the region, Uganda, Kenya, and so on, because in terms of agriculture, Southern Sudan is very much fertile. Okay, so basically, economically, again, when it comes to herds, we have got actually the largest in Africa. When it comes to animals, we've got the largest in Africa. No one can actually compete with the Southern Sudan, So basically, if I were to put all those things in one pool, I would say that Southern Sudan will be very much prosperous.
Okay, Sarah, what's your opinion of that?
I think economically, yes, I agree with Paul. It has the resources to be an economically self-sustaining country. As Paul says, it's the oil, the agricultural land, and minerals. There's a lot of unexplored minerals in Southern Sudan. And yes, the wildlife, it has the potential of having tourism if you want it. Yet the problem is that what we have seen so far is a tendency to another centralized state. And I think Southern Sudan needs to act urgently to make sure that we don't see a replication of the same mistakes with areas, peripheral areas, that don't benefit as much as the center, and get supported and see the presence of the government, which frankly in the last few years have not seen sufficiently. I think what you get on the ground is that the SPLM was much more present during the war than GOSS has been afterwards. And there may be a valid reason. As I said, the transition is challenging, but it's something that must be remedied urgently, because it can become the point of long-term failure of a new independent Southern Sudan.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Osman?
Yeah, I would agree completely with Sarah and Paul. That is, Southern Sudan in terms of resources is much more better than all the neighboring surrounding from Kenya to the north of Sudan. But yet again, it wouldn't come an easy way. These resources are sitting there for the last 50 years, and still Southern Sudan is one of the most poorest part of the earth. And infrastructure will be crucial, and market will be more than crucial, because market will the only way to generate security. There must be a market to be common between the people of Southern Sudan rather than anything else, and this is why we see that is people of Southern Sudan will enjoy the resources. Thank you.
Daniel Deng?
I think I agree with them that Southern Sudan is one of the very rich country, and what is needed is just the security.
Yeah.
That's true, and then people will enjoy. And the resources in the Southern Sudan will not be only for the Southern Sudan, it will be for the region as a whole. Just now, as you see, many people in Uganda and other neighboring, they are now in the Southern Sudan. But for sure, if there is this big mechanized agriculture to be there now, a lot of things would have happened in the south. So I agree totally. The Southern Sudan is not a poor state.
Yeah, we're all in.
Whether the SPLM might be willing to lose an election.
Maybe we'll come back to that, Mark. but we'll move on for now. Yes, gentleman in the front row.
My name is Khalid Al-Mubarak. I am the media counselor at the Embassy of Sudan. And since the embassy has not been represented in the panel, can I, in the name of British fairness, ask for a comment and not a question?
Okay, one comment.
Yeah, my comment is this, that the representation of the situation in the Sudan, I don't think was fair in some aspects. For example, my colleague here has spoken about security in Sudan. Actually, now the political parties have got their headquarters, they have got their newspapers, including the Communist Party of Sudan, and people can express their opinions without being hunted by the government or punished by the government. This is one point. I think he exaggerated that. Another question is the census. The census was actually run with international help, headed by a South African, a respected South African expert, with the United Nations help. And although you could say the census anywhere can't be perfect, the census in Sudan, there were objections, and the census committee looked into them and replied and said they do not nullify the whole census. The question of the security law, people should imagine that when 7/7 happened in this country, and when 9/11 happened in the United States, what these two great democracies did to their civil liberties in order to survive, to protect the safety of the country. Sudan, in 2008, a column of 2,000 fighters crossed from Chad and entered the capital and destroyed part of the capital. And some people in the opposition say the security forces should only collect information like postgraduate students and pass them on to other bodies. This is too naive and not something which can happen in this world. I personally think that Sir Derek Trumply, who is a retired British diplomat, who is head of the Evaluation and Assessment Commission, we heard him in Oxford in June. He said, I am optimistic about the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. There are problems, like some of the problems raised by the panelists, like the border demarcation, future relations between North and South, debts, and such things, that these have to be ironed out now and not after the referendum. And I think that's a very valid point. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
I hope next time you will invite the embassy to be fair.
Well, we have a representative of the government of Sudan here. Okay, at the back there. Gentleman at the back.
I have no intention of mounting a defence for the NCP here, but
we're after questions now.
exactly. I'm Goni Adrian. I'm currently a lawyer in London, but I come here as a concerned Southern Sudanese person. My question relates to the accommodation of more or less opposition parties within Southern Sudan itself. We've discussed the NCP. We've discussed the shortcomings of the North in relation to the upcoming election. So what exactly is the SPLM doing to accommodate the various parties that are from the South? And in relation to that, what's the progress of the South-South dialogue, which gained momentum at some point a few years ago, but somehow we don't hear anything about it now?
Okay, no, thank you very much. Another question? Yes, another gentleman at the back there with a hand up.
My name is Garth Glentworth. My best description is as a retired aid bureaucrat. I used to work for DFID on the Sudan, but I would like to bargain with you for 2 comments rather than 1 question. Is that possible?
I think that's the wrong way a bargain works, doesn't it? No, well, let's have one comment.
Well, 1 comment. The comment is, let us not unilaterally demonize the NCP. The SPLM has its own agenda. It doesn't want the elections either. And one reason for its complexity, which was sanctioned by both the NCP and the SPLM in the National Constitutional Review Commission, is that they want to make it unworkable as a demonstration of popular will. That's the point I wanted to make.
Okay, well, I'll take those bundle. I mean, that refers back to the first question too. So I'm going to just ask Paul and then Osman just to comment on that thing about the SPLM. You've got 3 comments there. The core question is, how pluralistic is the SPLM? Would it allow other political space for other opposition and for other parties to run South Sudan eventually?
Well, I wish, one SPLM member was here to answer those questions. But I will attempt to answer those questions. As far as the political parties in the Southern Sudan is concerned, I think all the registered political parties in the Southern Sudan are fully participating in the election, and they're campaigning also freely. So I don't know where the people that who asked the question got their information from. I've been to Juba, and I go to Juba almost frequently, and I could see that people. I mean, one of the most vibrant parliament is actually the Parliament of Juba. It's unfortunate that if some of you has got access to have the Southern Sudan TV, which you can actually watch in UK, then you will compare the Parliament in Juba and the Parliament in Khartoum. There is no comparison whatsoever. So that shows to you that the intention and the demand by the people to make sure that the Parliament it become more democratic, other political views and opinions are also being heard, and I think that's that's what we have in the Southern Sudan. To whether it can be, you would not expect the kind of democracy that we have in the Southern Sudan to become overnight like the Westminster democracy. It will never happen. It will take a long time. And I cannot see even in any country in Africa which has got more or less, what you have in Westminster. So, it's going to take a gradually very long time. So, you have to establish institutions to make sure that, there is also check and balance, and there is also, pressure to make sure that, people will be freely expressing their views, and they will be able to participate in the election. I think that's what I can say.
Okay, Osman, do you want to respond to?
Yeah, I would say there is an issue there of the space available for other political forces, but I would say there is more to look at an excuse for the SPLM. But I think the reality is there is political forces that are genuinely represented in the parliament and actively working there freely, and I would say personally I would be more free in Juba rather than in Khartoum as a political activist or as a human rights defenders. But I would say that the issue is when I talked to Baga and Amam about this report we received about some people being detained from the NCP and other southern groups, and he said, these are militias, or they are doing a political activity or kind of military activity. We know, and the fact is there is an issue with the activity, in particular in the Upper Nile, in Ali Nil and Bahr al-Ghazal, of a specific militia. They are not as such political party. That's a big issue maybe concerning South. I said earlier, it's not going to be resolved by just having the wish that is there is free political practices in the south, because what common in the people of the south, as I said, is their tribe, and so far most of the political party are along the tribal line, and even within the tribe are more militias rather than political forces. Like Lama Cole, he's obviously Bashir guy having guns, militia, and he wants to claim he is a political party. I wouldn't. He might claim that, but that is a big question.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to come back on that quickly on this question of the SPLM and the...
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with at least partially with what Osman says. I think the SPLM is still struggling on how to allow space for other parties. I think there's different souls in the SPLM. Others would be more prepared to allow for a broader, democratic participation, and other parties to play a role. Not immediately, perhaps. I don't think anybody's fully prepared immediately to share the space with others, but they understand that they at one point have to. And there are others that are less prepared, and they see the SPLM as fundamentally continuing to have the role to guide and lead the people until the new state is strong enough to open for pluralism somehow, and that is going to be a tension that will be played out, as Osman says, also because of the ethnic tensions and of course the connotation of the SPLM being dominated ethnically, at least. That is the common perception. That is what is also the complaint by many. Because there has been less seen, in the periphery in certain areas. And also, I think, you were referring to Jonglei as one of the key areas of tension. I mean, Jonglei, we know what's happening in Jonglei during the war. That was always going to be something that the SPLM had to deal with, and I'm not sure that has happened in a way that really allowed, for reconciliation, for, space for new forces, for an engagement that was more pluralistic, and that carries through also in the politics of these states.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Sarah. Daniel Deng, do you want to come back on this question of the SPLM?
Well, I thought my brothers and sisters, they have already answered. What we are looking at, as a church person, what we see that SPLA or SPLM have done their best, because these people are transforming from the guerrilla to the government. And people are expecting miracle to happen at a night. So they have to be respected because they are transforming. And the reason there are problems here and there is because they've been left alone. Nobody's helping them. Nobody's teaching them. So I thought really we have to give time. We have to give an honeymoon to them, because time, it is too short for them really to learn and make the democracy as it is, and they were coming out from the bush. So that's how so what they have said is correct.
Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Can I add that it's true, we need to give time, but we can't be complacent either. Yeah. Because if the trend continues as it is, exactly, that is not going to bode very well for the future. So it's true, it's a challenge and it will take time, but there are signs that are not encouraging, and it needs to be nipped in the bud, because it will become a problem long term.
Okay, we'll go on to the next questions now. So, 3 more questions. Yes, one at the back there, Lorraine.
Yes, I'm Natalia Chan from the Sudan Associate Parliamentary Group. We've seen a lot of increased international attention suddenly on Sudan this week. We're actually holding parliamentary hearings right now in which we've addressed a lot of these issues, and we've spoken to at least 3 of the panelists have been in Parliament. I was just wondering, everyone seems to be calling for more robust international engagement. In what format could this happen? Is it in a contact group which brings in China and the Arab states, or how do you see this happening up to and indeed far beyond the referendum?
Okay, thanks for that. Another question? Yes, there's a gentleman down here in the front.
Hi, Dominic Dudley from the Middle East Economic Digest. I just want to ask about the election in April. How likely is it to go ahead, and what might happen if it doesn't go ahead, or indeed if it does go ahead, if there are any kind of predictions on the results?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yes, there's a woman just there in the middle, just there, I think.
Sarah Hassan, I'm a research analyst with Global Insight, a risk consultancy here in London. If, as people are saying, maybe 70% of Southern Sudanese at least would vote for an independent South Sudan. I mean, can we expect that that will be it? We will have an independent South Sudan after that, and no intervention from Khartoum? Will that be, would that be just a given that we'll have this new state? Also, I mean, if the gentleman over there was talking about mobile phones and weaponry coming from Khartoum to the south already, I mean, can we foresee the resumption of the civil war, or I mean, what are we expecting?
More conflict. Okay, let's take two first two answers, so central questions there. Let's take international engagement to begin with. Always talked about, and it was an enormous factor in the signing of the CPA in the first place in 2005. What do you think? I mean, what more could international actors do now? What form should that take? More diplomatic engagement, more money? What do you think? Let's start from, let's go the other way around this time. Daniel.
Yeah, I think the international community actually were responsible from the very beginning in bringing these two, bringing to the end of this war. It was their efforts, it was their money, it was the term of manpower. They managed to bring the government in the north and the rebel in the south to sign an agreement. So we give thanks to them. But after this thing was signed, they thought the work is finished. They went back. So what we are thinking, it is the same efforts they made during the signing of the CPA. That is the same effort they should put to make sure that these people should not bring back the country back to war. So they have to make effort to make sure that the election is fair. The people of Darfur, I mean the people of southern Kordofan, the people of Blue Nile have been asked. Public consultation is done in a good form. BIA border, Southern Sudan border. All these things is to be implemented because the international community are part of it. That's what we are calling. You come back and check the baby boy or baby girl that you have been supporting, whether it is grown or walking or still crumbling. So this is what we're wanting. Thank you.
Okay, that's Daniel. Osman?
Yeah, excellent. I'll agree with the father. That is the international community. The stake is high, I think, when it comes to 2010 and 2011, which is a two flashpoint. And the question is, would we look at these two specific events, the election and the referendum, the election for transforming the country to democracy and the referendum to give the people of Southern Sudan the right to stay or break away, or could be an opportunity, or could lead to chaos, violence, and maybe war. And I think through this discussion and many other discussions, and you've seen the reports by too many organizations issued during the last 3 or 4 weeks about what will happen and how to mitigate against all these factors that might lead to violence and conflict in Sudan. And I think here I would say the international community might have to play that major role. Now we have the two biggest mission, I think, in the world in Sudan, which is one in Darfur and the other one in the south. And I think now if the issue would be the violence, how to protect civilians and how to avoid violence. Of course, it will be good if there is some pressure on the government of Sudan from international as well as the African partner to exert some pressure on the government of Sudan to ensure that the election will be fair and free, which is, I think, this is a remote kind of chance now since we have only 2 months left. And I've just read today that is the declaration by the political forces of rejecting the registration process. And we would know that I don't think the election will take place in April. I don't think so. The other issue is therefore election without.
You don't think any election will take place?
No. No, okay. It will, but not in April, as I see. And if it in April, it will be it might be a point of violence, increasing violence in the country, rather of transforming the country to democracy. And equal, this will put the whole issue of referendum at stake. And I think two issues that is that the UNIMIS mandate, either within the current mandate of the UNIMIS, that we have to reinforce it to ensure security in the south and in the borders areas, in the Blue Nile, Abyei, Nuba Mountain and others, or change that mandate, and the Security Council have seriously to consider this issue. The issue of Darfur, that is without peace in Darfur, I think the election is unlikely to be fair and free and representative of the will of the Sudanese people. And I think we talked about the referendum and how the international community would have the responsibility, of course, not just to respect the choice of the people of Southern Sudan, but to protect that choice and to make sure it should be implemented, whatever the choice of that people.
Yeah. Okay, very good answer to all three questions. Sarah, answer that, but first of all, you're very quick. All I want is your prediction of April 2010. Will there be an election?
I think there will be an election.
Okay, there will.
We'll have an election. Whether the election will actually change anything in reality, I doubt it very much, to be honest, because as I said, the complexity is such that people will really struggle to express, genuine choice. Yeah. And that's just purely at a technical level without going into the politics of it.
I mean, one version of this that
impossible.
most people talk about now is that there will be an election, but it will only be a presidential election. So referring to your ballot, instead of 12 choices, you'll just
this
have
has
one.
been discussed for a long time, and of course another option is the president and the governors, because there is an issue of governance as well, and these people have to be replaced. There is a provision in the CPA that says they have to be replaced, and so that it's another it's something that needs to be taken into account, because they will not be legitimized after the elections if they are not democratically elected. So probably yes, there is a lot of discussion about the local level elections and what happened to them, but there are a number of issues related to that. There's the popular consultation in the two areas that's linked to representation on the ground, which is not just the governor. It is the elected MPs in the two areas that will vote on the popular consultation. So if you don't have that level of election, what happens to the popular consultation in the two areas?
Just one point on that, actually. Salah Ghosh, the President Bashir, National Security Advisor, yesterday made a statement in one of the Future Study Institute, and he said that he expected violence to be in some part of Sudan, and he indicated the south and Darfur and maybe the border area, and he took in the north will be perfect. And as in these two areas are not part of Sudan, and that is his statement. It's being quoted all over the newspaper, Sudanese newspaper this morning, actually.
See, the reality is that even if from now on all goes fantastically well and we have perfect monitoring, all the electoral observers, it's just the last bit of the process. Everything so far hasn't been monitored, hasn't been supported as it should have been. So we're coming in too late. And in a way, for me, as I said, the elections have to go ahead for pragmatic reasons, but we need to invest on the preparation for the post-election. I think that's where the money should go, in preparing for mitigation of the post-electoral tension that is.
So you're saying we can write off the elections actually already?
It's
too late.
It is too late.
Yeah. Okay. And the international issue, quickly, how can international actors
I've said that before. I think definitely there needs to be a change in the type of international engagement we see in Sudan on three levels. One is political, one is in terms of the monitoring that the mission provides, and one is in terms of the aid. And politically, I've said that before, and I will never stop saying that. We need a stronger, higher level, a more cohesive political engagement to support this very delicate phase. I have been part of the negotiations in Navash, representing the government of Italy, and at the time, Italy was never a significant partner, but the Troika had the representatives in Navash had direct lines to the heads of states in the countries. They could call them. They could call they could call on them whenever it was needed to call, either President Bashir or Dr. Garang. We don't see that now, and if we don't have that level of engagement, it's unlikely that we'll see much movement on the ground. In terms of the monitoring of the agreement, UNMISS has been very deficient. It's been very risk-averse, has led on critical areas of assistance, actually, like on return or integration of the returnees, on DRR, on protection, which are normally led by technical agencies. But it is an integrated mission, so they had coordination and leadership responsibilities, which they have not fulfilled ideally. And this is despite, in the South, having for the last 2 years a very strong and committed head of mission that has, though, been unable to operate as he would have liked because of the bureaucracy of DPKO and the way DPKO operates. So, I mean, again, it's not just a matter of the mandate. The mission is structurally risk-averse, cumbersome, and unable to provide adequate monitoring in a complex context such as Southern Sudan. And then there is the aid. You know, we've used Southern Sudan as the laboratory for all these great ideas about engagement in fragile states and, you know, harmonization, alignment, how we're going to support these, you know, in line with the Paris Declaration. Well, you know, we need to change gear. We know we've had so many assessments of the pooled funds, of the, you know, the various, the plethora of funding mechanisms that exist. We know it doesn't work, but we need to have the courage to change quickly, to deliver more, while we continue to support the capacity of the government to take on this task when it is ready.
Right. Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. It's very clear. Paul, very quickly, predictions for April 2010 election?
I think the challenging of the election, of course, is the condition, whether the condition has been created for election to be free and fair. And I think this is some of the things that which will probably ring in so many people's minds. So,
but do you think there will be an election?
Well, the election people are preparing for it. I mean, as we speak. So, you know, I can't say more than that. People are preparing for it, and all the parties, you know, including the SPLM, will be coming up with their list of candidates probably, you know, by the end of the week. So, I mean, that's what I could actually say as far as preparation is concerned. And I think what is actually, you know, the question that many people are asking is whether there is a right condition, you know, for it to be free and fair.
The international donors, the international role, how would you like to see, international actors more involved? How would that happen?
Yeah, I think we wanted to see more involvement of international community, because we have to remember that the international community is the guarantor of the CPA. Without the presence of the international community in Naivasha, the CPA would have not been signed. But it was the reassurance of the international community that make the CPA to be signed between the two parties. So, but of course, the role of the international community in the last probably 4 to 5 years was that, you know, what happened in Darfur shifted completely the attention of the international community. And CPA was basically more or less forgotten. And so we want the international community to refocus, on the implementation of the CPA. We are not saying that forget about what is happening in Darfur, but also what is happening in Darfur will be very much help if the CPA is fully implemented. It will give some kind of incentive of the war, of the parties who are actually at war in Darfur.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We're going to take another batch of questions now. Gentleman at the back,
Hi, my name's Giles. I just got back from Jonglei State. I've been there for a couple of months, and I've had some experience of Sudan and other places. My question really would be to do with the intertribal violence. Increasingly from a couple of years ago, most young people are much more interested in fighting. I was with the Luer and the Murle tribes. They're much more interested in fighting each other. 12-year-old boys, heavily armed, much more armed than they were a couple of years ago. Their interest is purely about ethnic cleansing, about wiping each other out. And I just wonder how the panel sees that will go. Because we're talking about the CPA. They don't even know what the CPA is there. They're just interested in killing each other.
Okay, thank you. Yes, gentleman at the back there,
And David Brown from the Aegis Trust. How would the panel see events through the coming year affecting marginalised groups within the North itself? And are there risks attendant in any possible oversight or overlooking of their concerns?
Thanks, David. There was a gentleman here. Yes,
Sorry, I don't want to film, I'm also from the Aegis Trust. James Smith. Just a question to Osman. You mentioned the census at length, the 300% increase in the nomadic tribes in South Darfur and other examples. What implication do you think that has on the elections, if any?
Actually, we'll take another couple while we're going around. Any other questions, or maybe that's it? Gentleman in the front here, yeah.
Graham Kings, Bishop of Sherborne. I was wondering if I could ask representative of Sudan in the audience whether, if the referendum voted for secession, whether he thought that would be allowed.
Okay. Other questions? Yes, gentleman over there in the corner. At the end of a row.
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm an engineer and a PhD student. I spent a lot of time in Jonglei as well, in Dugpadjet. Over the last few years, at least one of the phones that you talk about, I probably left there. Whether or not that makes me implicit in some violence, I'm not sure. So sitting beside the issue of political construction, you've obviously got the physical construction of southern Sudan. Now, fundamental to any possibility of a peaceful and prosperous state is the construction of a viable means of production. Something slightly more diverse than purely oil. So I'm just wondering, at what stage does it become much more imperative to start to invest in an infrastructure that will enable diversification away from oil, or at least to start tapping into some of these things that we all know Sudan has, such as fertile land, minerals, and a lot of other latent value items. So.
Right.
Other than, sorry, just to continue for one more sec, I know there are some roads being built, but the roads that I've seen have never lasted more than one wet season, and that's a lot of millions being spent into roads that simply fall apart after 1 year. Yeah. It's really incredible.
Okay, any other questions? Could you take one more there? Yes, gentleman in the middle there.
Yeah, I'm Kenneth from Conciliation Resources. I'm interested in hearing from the panel their view on South Kordofan and Brunei State, and whether the issue of popular consultation will have any effect if authority will take place.
Thank you. It's one about the popular consultation in the transitional areas and whether it'll have. I'll take one more for now, and the panel can answer which ones they like, I think. Any others? Yes, gentleman there at the back.
My name is John Tosh, and my question concerns the development of infrastructure in the future. And I'm wondering whether the Juba government is already engaged in negotiations with not only international donors, but the immediate neighbors to plan for this transport infrastructure, which is so vitally needed. I'm thinking of railways and roads into Kenya and Uganda. Is there much active discussion on that front?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's answer some of those. There's a sort of grouping around development, infrastructure, diversification, say. Maybe we could take those as one lot. Sarah, do you want to, you're pretty up on this.
I've been very passionate about roads in southern Sudan, because anybody who's been to southern Sudan, it's so tangible and visible, and it is in the eyes of people. That was one thing people expected from the agreement.
Yes.
That they could actually go from A to B on a bus. And that has materialized. You know, all we've seen is a few kilometers of tarmac road in Juba. And yet there was a lot of money earmarked for roads in the multi-donor trust fund.
Yes, yes.
That hasn't been spent yet.
Yeah.
And so we've continued to use WFP Food for War to get labor-intensive all-weather roads that last, as you say, one season. And then here we go again. And of course that makes assistance, delivery of assistance impossible, because you can only access these areas for about 5 months, and of course these 5 months don't match the funding cycles. So you get the funding at a time where the rains are about to start, and that's where you can implement, but then it rains and you can't go there to deliver the assistance. And by the time the roads are passable again, it's November and you've got a window of 2 months. So what do? You use the money on some visibility thing, you know, like t-shirts or bags or whatever, because you need to absorb it quickly. Or you fund an ODI consultant like me to go and do a study, because that also spends a lot of money and deals with the burn-out rate or whatever they call it. I find that disturbing, you know, that we cannot do better with so much analysis and understanding of Sudan and of what people, you know, again, we focus so much support on building the capacity of GOSS, and then for the people what would have actually strengthened the vision of government, was to see the delivery of the services, was to see the roads, the infrastructure. That would have given them the impression that there was a functioning government. But we've been more preoccupied with the modalities of supporting the government rather than helping the government truly deliver in one way or the other. And so that applies to key services like health and education as well, where, as I said before, we've actually seen a collapse in the delivery of services because the government is still not in a position to pay many of these teachers and to pay many of the health workers. The NGOs used to do that during OLS, but now the modality of assistance has changed. You know, we support the government to do that. The net result for the people on the ground is no access to health service, no access to schooling. That doesn't really give an energized vision of governance to people.
Paul, do you want to come back to that? You're the representative of the government of South Sudan. According to the most recent estimate, in 2005, at the end of the war, Juba had 7 kilometres of paved road, and now 5 years later they have 11 kilometres of paved road. So how do you explain that?
Yeah, I think, I mean...
And the whole south, there are 50, but I think that's a vast overestimate.
And put a price tag on it, how much has been spent on
yes. I mean,
that,
per kilometre of road in Juba, it's got to be the most expensive kilometres in the world.
I think probably, as Sarah actually said it, you know, I mean, we just came from war, and you know, after the CPA was signed, there was a lot of dubious contractors rushing to the southern Sudan, saying that, you know, because there was actually no mechanism of checking them, whether they could actually do the job. And as a result, there's some contract which was awarded to them, they did not do the job, you know. And these things, of course, had a serious impact in the outcome of things like building of roads and so on, you know. And as a result, there is, of course, you know, the southern Sudan government then begin to look into, you know, the kind of contractors who are actually rushing to the southern Sudan. And to be fair, to be honest with you, is that, you know, a lot of money has been spent on building Maram roads, but these were temporary, you know, measures in order to make sure that there's at least mobility. People are able to move freely. In the southern Sudan today, by the way, as you know, as before even the war, you can actually move from one area of southern Sudan to the other without any problem, except during the raining season, because as you know, most of the roads are Maram roads. When it rains heavily, it will wash out the Maram, and this is the kind of problem that we face with. But you know, there are other things that, because also it is not in the international, I mean, in the media, southern Sudan is building road as we speak, which will be completed by next year. Okay, international road, which is going to be tarmac from Juba to the border of Uganda. That's the first. So we are actually, the government of Southern Sudan is doing it by phases. That one is the first one. The second one will be another road which will be going through Yekaya, going again to Uganda, which could also have an outlet to DRC. That one is going to be the next one. The third one is going to be Kenya, you know, Kenya Juba Road, which is going to be again, you know, in the pipeline to be done. Of course, those things that because of resources that we have to prioritize. You know, because it is very important for us to have outlet. If the Southern Sudanese voted for independence, of course, this road will be very critical. Another thing that which is also is not in the media is that there is a lot of negotiation between the Ethiopians and the Southern Sudan government to build a road. These are already things that which are in the pipeline. Okay? So all those things, there are so many projects which are in the pipeline. And of course, you don't expect it to be done overnight. You know, 4 years or 2 years, you know, I mean, it's too short, okay? But there are clear plans, okay, as far as the outlet is concerned. Another thing that which people probably are not aware of it, which probably need to be revived, this is a regional kind of networking, okay? I mean, during the negotiation of the CPA, there were already an attempt between the regional players, the Uganda, the Kenya, the Rwanda, the Burundi, the Central Africa as a whole, in terms of the railway network. And the feasibility study was done by the German company, okay? But because of lack of, you know, finance and so on, these things has been shelved, okay? So there are so many things. So if I can just answer the Jongole thing.
Okay, yes, Jongole, yes. And the question of the ethnic violence as well.
Yes, that's what I wanted actually to answer. Now, the Jongole situation is that, you know, many of you probably are not aware of this. The tension between the Dinka, for instance, and the Murle, and the Nuer on the other side, and the Murle, is a long, you know, it's not something that which happened yesterday. Murle by nature, okay, their way of life is actually, you know, based on going and trying to raid other people's cattle. The same thing with the Toposa, the same thing with the Turkanas, okay? It's a regional thing. So these things have been there for a very long time. Of course, the war might have made it worse, okay? Therefore, the government has been trying to do to make sure that these ethnic communities are reconciled. But you can do this thing through also education and awareness. It's not only in the southern Sudan. I happen to be from that part of the area, okay? And I know exactly what is happening. You've got the Turkana in Kenya, you've got the Toposa in the southern Sudan, you've got the Murle, and then you've got the other tribes also across the border in Uganda. You know, there is always raiding. Okay, this thing is not something that which happened, which is new. It might have been made worse because they've acquired a lot of sophisticated weapons. Okay, but it doesn't mean that the government has taken away the responsibility to make sure that this kind of problem is going to be resolved.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Osman, could you specifically address for one about the marginalised peoples in North Sudan? This is often forgotten about, that, you know, there was a war in East Sudan, etc. You know, it's not only Darfur in the south.
Yeah, it's true. It's just Khartoum, the capital itself, maybe more than half of the population are IDPs, or people coming from living in shanty towns around Khartoum. More, I would say, if Khartoum population, according to the last census, will come to 10, then I think there is 5 million of displaced people from Darfur, the south, east, and other part of the country. And maybe that was very visible when John Garang came to Khartoum. Yeah, actually, one of the Islamist thinkers, his name Tijani Makki. Yeah. And he said that Khartoum is an African capital. And he hadn't seen these people. They lived almost most of their life in Khartoum. Anyway, these are the people which are invisible for no one apart from when they come out to greet John Garang when his plane landed in Khartoum. They come out. But I think, and that is maybe an issue of national security issue for the government of Sudan as well. They don't look at them as people. They have to consider their development, that they look how to contain this area and control them by different security measures, and they know that. I think this is the problem of the government in the north. They look at the people, the marginalized people in the IDBs or in different camps or in the shanty town as a security hazards, and it's going to be a problem. I think the election or at a certain point when within considering the political tension within Sudan. I will just come to the issue of the infrastructure in the south, and I think apart from all this explanation why and the issue of, I think there is other two issues, which is corruption, and although there is a commission, anti-corruption commission in the south, and although the President Salva Kiir, he said he's giving it his most attention, but it's serious, and it's serious in a way that I think they have to get a mechanism. I know that I wouldn't say it should be an inevitable thing with the new government, with lack of development, that corruption should be associated with the practice in the south. And the other thing is lack of entrepreneurship, which is the government of Southern Sudan. They have to do an effort to create that kind of, not through corruption. I mean, corruption is one of the mechanisms to create entrepreneurship, might be, but that is not the appropriate way of doing it. Relying on the Ethiopian, I was in Juba, and actually all the hotels, and then the big investment in Juba is run by Ethiopian companies, and they are prefab. 10 years, all these hotels are not going to be there because they are prefab built there, and they are very expensive, $200 a night. All this money is not staying in the south. When I talk to them, it's going to Addis or Eritrea or Asmara. And that wouldn't help. And the other businesses is by Ugandan and Kenyan, or some people from the Rose. The south of Sudan, by doing that, the government not helping to build a local entrepreneurship in the south to develop the south and to build the economy of the country. The second issue of having a human resource and a skillful labor and expertise, most of the Southerns who are educated and skillful are living abroad. Diaspora in Europe, United States, Kenya, Uganda, or somewhere else because of the war, but none of them have returned, including officially in the government of Southern Sudan. I know them personally, their kids, even those who graduate from university, are staying in Nairobi and Kenya. They don't want to come to Juba. And Juba is And I don't know, normal life is not back yet to Juba and Southern Sudan, and this serious issue needs to be considered on talking about developing the southern of Sudan.
Okay, thanks, Osman. Daniel, do you want to come back on any of that? It might be interesting for you to address the question of the ethnic violence now, because this is, obviously got very serious in the south, brought up by the gentleman at Bag.
I think one part of it has already been answered by my brother there concerning the ethnic violence happening. First of all, it has a history background.
Yeah.
There are some tribes in that jungle that think that all the cattle in the world belong to them. So they have to bring them back. So that's one idea. We need education for those. The second one make it worse at the moment is that these people actually, the part of the maybe majority, especially on the Morale side, they were part of the militia within the government long ago. But after the war, they came back to their own areas with their own guns. And that they're using that guns as the only way of surviving, terrorizing the neighbor, because it become a tool now to collect the cattle back to themselves. So that is cause of the ethnic violence in the country. It is not a political. Problem. It could be easily contained if the Southern Sudan is given a power. I mean, given a backing of how to deal with such a thing. That could be easily contained. Already, the faith-based group like us as the church, we have already started. Recently, last year, we made a march, a big group of over 200 people from the church to Law Nuer, and we made a peace conference for 4 days in a place called Ayot. We brought the Dinka chief, we brought the Nuer chief, and we reconciled them. Those chiefs managed to contain the security situation between the Nuer, Dinka of Duk and the Nuer of Ayot. That have helped. Now, this year, the religious group also is moving to the Lao Nuer and to to Morale. We are trying to let them understand because they have never been given. They don't know what is even the CPA because they have never been given that education. Yeah. So the lack of education to this group, to this ethnic problem, it has been exacerbated that there is ethnic fighting in the country. But it is the lack of education. People are not knowing what is happening in the world. So it is really, it is there, but people are going to address it if they are supported.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. We're going to have to wrap up now, so I'm going to ask each of the panelists 1 minute to sum up their views, and I'm also going to ask you to name one thing you'd like to see to make the next 18 months of Sudan go as smoothly as possible, and for all these things, which probably won't happen.
The best British tradition is three.
Sorry, no, you've only got time for one, so 1 minute, and we'll start with Osman here.
Good luck.
Just have to pray for Sudan.
Okay, pray. That's Osman. Sarah.
God, I don't know. To be honest, you can't simplify it to one. It's a complex country, and I think it's wrong to always look for the one magic bullet. There is no magic bullet.
The one thing you prefer. I mean,
one thing I prefer.
One thing you'd like.
I'd like to see a more serious engagement and brave choices to change the trend, because we haven't seen enough of those.
Okay, Paul.
I think one thing I probably would say is building confidence between the SPLM and CPA as the signatory to the CPA, to make sure that any other protocol which has not yet been implemented are implemented, and making sure that there is a peaceful transition if the Southern Sudanese opted for a separate South.
Daniel Day.
I think I go with Paul. We need the NCP and the SPLM really to realize that they have the responsibility. This is their country. They should not allow this country really to go back to war. That's what we want to see.
Okay.
And I want to bless you all. Here I'm
so we end on a note of prayers and blessings. I think we'll probably need them all. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to the panelists.
Thank you.